Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. My name is Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free. And when it comes to homeschooling, there is no topic where that is more true. You really, really have to open up your mind, rethink how you live your life, and take that leap. And so, joining me to have this discussion today, where we're not just talking about homeschooling, but we're talking about homeschooling with students who are neurodivergent, right? Not your average student, students who would in the public schools qualify for special education and having an individualized education plan. But as Mandee told me in our messaging conversations, homeschooling is the ultimate individualized education plan. So thank you so much, Mandee, for joining me here today.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, and I know this is a super big passion of yours. So I want to go through some data and really make the case for how special education programs in the public schools are really more about compliance and students are not doing well in those. But first, just quickly, give us a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about your daughter, and then we'll go into that data and then we'll swing back around and we'll talk about how we're doing the homeschooling thing at home, recommend some resources, and just talk more about how any family really can do the homeschooling thing.
Sure. I was having a hard time with our school district. My daughter is asynchronous, as I feel every kid is, with learning, and she was really struggling because they didn't want to put her in an integrated setting. We were having problems. There was a kid who maybe was putting his hands on her. No one was telling us. I mean, there's issue after issue. And, one of the big things that they say in special education is to always presume competency. Let the child show you that they can't do it. Don't assume they can't do it. And then give them whatever supports they need to make that happen. Unfortunately, I did not feel that was happening. But I didn't think homeschool was an option. I had a kid in special education. So when they told me she was going to have to do virtual kindergarten in 2020, I said,
Mm.
no, it's just not going to happen. And I had to pull her. And we found out that homeschooling has been the best thing for her. And it's been a passion for me to tell other parents with kids who are in special education that not to write this off. This can be a really great alternative to school.
Yes, and I just commend you so much for taking that leap. It's definitely not easy, especially, I come in and I have a teaching background. I have worked with students with disabilities, and it can be intimidating, especially when there's so much messaging out here in the culture that teachers are the experts. Parents really have to rely on them, and especially if you have a student who has specialized learning needs. But again, parents are the experts. Not discounting what teachers do and the knowledge they have, but you were literally born to be the parent of your child. You are exactly what your child needs, and you have the discernment required, right? Even if you aren't always the one who's doing the thing, right? You can do many things, but
Yeah.
you have the discernment and the ability to know if this is the proper program for your child and really be able to take it and evaluate that advice. And so I want to talk more about exactly what you do with your daughter and some of the resources you use and other things like that. But first, I do want to go through the data and just really make that case that okay, your child qualifies for special education. Your school says they have this whole team and this whole program and they can provide exactly what your child needs, but the data shows otherwise. And now, hey, maybe there are some really great public schools out there that do have top quality programs, but nationwide, the data shows otherwise. And so I'm going to pull up these NAEP scores, these national education scores, and they show that students with disabilities continue to lag behind. And so these are the most recent scores from 2022. And I'm going to go down here to right here, right? The biggest drop in average scores for students with disabilities came in 8th grade math, right? And so these are students who are about to go into high school, once you get into high school, they sort of assume you have these skills. But especially for students with disabilities, we know that retaining knowledge is often one of those difficult things if you don't have those proper supports in place. And so they declined from 247 in 2019 to 243 in 2022. And so certainly we know that the pandemic was in there. But as I'm going to show you in a second, this is a trend that started before the pandemic. Grade 4 math scores declined by 2 points. So not as big of a drop, but still we're seeing a decline. Same thing in reading, not as big of a decline, but no progress, right? And then you can see here in the bar graphs, it kind of shows visually what this gap looks like. And you can see this is something that has persisted over time. And I also have another article here. I'll pull that one up real quick and show you from 2019, an article showing a very similar trend right here. So this is from the 2019 or 2009 to 2019. You can see while students, your neurotypical students who aren't in special education, they're making some progress, right? I did a podcast on Monday talking about how it's less than desirable progress, but you can see we're having statistically significant drops and quite big ones for students with disabilities. And this was before the pandemic. So I know a lot of people like to chalk it up to, well, the pandemic, and no. Just like so many of the trends we see in education at large, special education is no different. These are trends that started well before the pandemic. All students are struggling, but particularly our students with disabilities. And my own personal experience with this is I was a teacher for over a decade. I started off doing tutoring with in reading and in math and reading comprehension at a place called Lindamood Bell Learning Processes. So I worked with a wide variety of students, some students who were neurotypical, just needed to catch up, and then some students who had quite severe disabilities, students on the spectrum. And I saw that, I mean, it's a great program. I highly recommend it, but it's also a little bit pricey. But I saw that you really can make a difference.
Yeah.
And then when I went into the public school system and I saw what they were doing, where they were just doing a little bit here, a little bit here, right? Whereas these students really need intensive intervention, usually, especially to get them caught up. And the other thing was just compliance. I kept hearing this word compliance, compliance, compliance. And I'm like, okay, compliance. Okay, sure. We want to comply with the law, but shouldn't compliance and actually doing right by the kid have some sort of relevance? And I just wasn't seeing any relevance in that at all. And more recently, I've been doing some advocacy for parents and going to these IEP meetings and really seeing that even when there are good teachers there who want to do the right thing, the system is just not set up in a way where they can actually provide what the students need and the type of environment students need. So I know it's really hard. I know especially can be daunting if you're working and you have a child who has special needs. But that's why I wanted to bring you on here, Mandee, so you can tell us a little bit more about what does a day-to-day look like for your daughter? How do you, still figure out the financial side of things, figure out a schedule that works for your daughter or your child, and get the services that they need? Because just like I don't do it all on my own, and my son is pretty neurotypical, but I certainly don't do it all on my own. I figure out different programs and different things. So tell us, what does like an average day or an average week look like for you and your daughter, and what are the types of resources that you use to make it happen?
So my daughter is an only child. She has multiple diagnoses. She's on the spectrum, and she is very advanced with language arts. And so she used to get bored and in trouble in preschool because she would read her own personal book aloud slightly faster than the teacher. So the really cool thing about homeschool is I'm able to spend 90 minutes on math with her because that's a challenge for us. And I can break it down and do it in little pieces, and we can use manipulatives, and we can go over the same thing over and over until she gets it. But with language arts, we're reading the classics. We can just dive there because that's where she's at. And that's one of my favorite things about homeschool is meeting the kids exactly where they are and not, teaching to the middle. Nobody's getting bored and nobody's falling behind because you're hitting them right where they need. An average day, our schedule is a little wild, but where I do have a child on the spectrum, it was really important to me for her to get with other kids. And so we found our local homeschool community. We do park days on Monday. She does electives on Tuesdays, which is chorus, drama, and American Sign Language. I don't know very many third graders doing that, so that was pretty awesome. On Wednesdays, we have co-op where she gets to learn science and history with other kids her own age. And some of them are neurodiverse and some of them aren't, but they're all super kind and from really involved families. Thursdays, we have gymnastics. And Fridays, we usually just get together with friends. And so we're able to see other kids. We're able to work on those social skills. We're able to meet her wherever she's at. We also do get private services.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I know that this is probably one of the bigger concerns, especially for students with disabilities, right?
Yeah.
So you have a really awesome program set up with her and you're meeting her different academic needs as you can, but a lot of parents still feel like they need to get the speech therapy, the occupational therapy, the counseling. So how, especially in a state, so I know like, for example, in New York State, you can access special education services if you don't go to a public or private school. However, I live in a state like Connecticut where you can't. If you are out of the public system, you do not get access to those special education services through the state. And I believe that's the case where you are too. So let's talk about how you make that happen.
So in Massachusetts, you can access.
Oh, you can. Okay.
I decided not to. I decided not to for many reasons. There were some great providers, and then there were some providers that were not giving her what she needed. And so I just thought, let's do a clean break. Let's go private. And, financially, you do have to prioritize what you want to do, and we did every single therapy that she got in school privately. And I noticed her skills went through the roof because the provider was communicating directly with me on a weekly, some of these therapies were more than once a week basis. And so they were saying, hey, we're doing this when we write the letter A. And so at home, when we wrote the letter A, I did the same thing. So it was across all platforms. And then she was able to make that work and it sunk in much faster. So she's graduated from occupational therapy. She's graduated from social skills. She still has speech because autism is a language-based disability. But she has this speech and language therapy once a week, when in the beginning she had 2 45-minute sessions a week. I mean, she's flown because we've been able to pick providers that are a good match for her, that are giving her exactly what they need, and then communicating back with the family on the goals, which I would never work with a provider unless we could come to goals together, right? And I don't want to work on things that are unnecessary or unhelpful for her. When the school would suggest things like, to work on stimming, which was not harmful and not necessary.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I see is like these goals that are written. I don't really understand where they're going. And then, of course, in order to change the goals, you have to have an PPT meeting or an IEP meeting. They call it different things in different places. And you have to figure out how it works in the schedule and try to get the whole team together. And it's like this big to do. But it seems like when you're working directly with the provider, not only do you have a much wider choice, right? Because usually at your school you have a speech therapist or maybe a couple, right? Or sometimes in the district they only have several occupational therapists and they're in one school one day and one school another day and going all over. So if your kid misses the one session, then it's like, oh well, they just missed that session, and of course the school still gets the funding for that day. So by going private and supplementing through your insurance, like you said, you definitely have to prioritize it, because you're not getting it fully covered by the state, but you just get so many more options, and your child is, and if somebody doesn't work for you, then you go find somebody else.
Yeah,
Whereas, go ahead.
I'm rural. Like, we live in the middle. I have to drive 20 so minutes to a grocery store. We don't have one in town, right? So I have options. And I don't have great insurance either. So I think that a lot of people have alternatives. They just don't know how to access them. And I have a lot of friends who have kids with different disabilities, whether it's dyslexia or, dyscalculia, and they're working with specialized tutors at home multiple times a week, which is more than they would have got if they were in a district.
Yeah. And I think that there's also something too about the parent-child relationship, right? I mean, it's so important. We know this in general. Parents try to give their kids as much love as they can, certainly. But we have this conversation, I think, more when it comes to the social aspect of things. And we talk about how school kind of disrupts that student teacher I'm sorry, parent teacher, no wait, what is it, parent student relationship, right, where it's like you send your kids off for 8 hours a day and you have this other trusted adult, and they have created all sorts of new rules and regulations and interpretations of consent, where they don't communicate with the parents very well. And as you were saying, when you have a child who's not just with your in elementary school, your teacher that you're assigned to, or in middle school and high school where you have your 5 subject teachers and a couple of extracurricular teachers, you additionally have this whole other team that's working with your child, right? And so it just puts so many more trusted adults who may not be properly communicating with you. And now so many schools are having these health centers that are directly in the schools. So I definitely think that there's something, just to the relationship between you and your child, and the just like the love that you're able to give them that an adult who's not in their family isn't. I know it's something that's hard to show data for, because like you can't prove something that didn't happen, right? Like if your daughter's in the public schools, you can't prove that she wasn't getting a certain amount of love that you're giving her now. But I don't know, can you talk just about your experience of having your daughter who's on the spectrum, and how important your guys' relationship is to her progress academically?
Sure. I mean, when she first came home, I had a very hard time with it. She needed a lot of things, and I wasn't used to giving them to her every single day. And the thing that fixed that was time. And I see people with neurotypical kids who are freaking out about spending time with their kids this summer. And I'm like, what a gift that you have to have time with your kids. Like, but I think a lot of parents don't see it that way. I think that having a relationship where you trust me, like she trusts me, and I can listen to her. If she's like, Mom, this isn't working, I'm really frustrated. Good. Thank you for telling me. You know what? Take a break. Thank you. I'm gonna listen to you. No, you can't skip it today, but you can take a break, right? If something's going a little too long, we're having a rough day, I can cut it short. I know my kid. But I will say that I talk to a lot of parents who are trying or are interested in homeschooling their special education kids. And I tend to be the receptacle of all of the horror stories. I know kids who have been dragged through the halls, kids who have been called the R word, kids who have been bullied by their teachers, kids who have trauma from school. And because their language skills aren't great, they're not able to always explain it. And sometimes it comes out later through anxiety with doorknobs because they've been locked in a room. Like, I don't want to say that happens everywhere. I don't believe it does, but I do think that there can be bad people in these specific positions. And if you have a kid who can't communicate that to you, how do you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I talked to a parent just the other day, and she has a child who has a very difficult situation, and she said a lot of days he just ended up in a room by himself with like a cot and a teacher, because that's the only thing that they basically could figure out what to do with him, where he wasn't disrupting the whole class and wasn't having a meltdown for himself. And I don't want to say that these people are bad people, right? I just want to say they're not put in a situation where they can provide what these students need and truly, yeah, give them what they need. I mean, especially like young kids. I mean, I feel like a lot of students who have who are hyperactive, right? They get these ADHD diagnosis, or they get mood disorder diagnoses. I'm like, hey, they need to be outside more. They need to be outside, running around, and just being able to enjoy the day, um, and not necessarily be in such a structured environment the whole time. I mean, I see it with my son. I mean, my son, yeah, every day we do a few lessons, or when he goes to his co-op, they do script is a big thing that they work on, and they do a math lesson, and they do right now they're researching different elements and doing little reports on them. So they have structured lessons and stuff, but it's they spend far more time running around outside in their imagination games and getting all their energy out. Whereas when you're in school, it's so structured and you have to sit in your seat all day. And if you're having, an episode, or you're having a difficult time, what's their only recourse? Their only recourse is to put you in a room by yourself with one teacher sort of just there making sure you're breathing, you
Yeah.
know?
And I will say that even with special education kids, you're only doing that book work for a short period of the day. I mean, our favorite thing is park day, where she goes to the park for 3 hours and plays with a huge variety of ages of kids and has so much fun and makes new friends, reconnects with old friends. I mean, most of our learning is done hands on. We get to go to libraries, we get to go to museums. Uh, it makes such a difference if you're learning about the Middle Ages and you're playing with swords at the Worcester Art Museum versus just a textbook in front of you. It's a totally different thing, and I think it's something that all kids can benefit from. And just because you have a kid who learns differently doesn't mean that it can't happen. And you can take the time, because those lessons are so short, you can spend more time on life skills. My kid can cook. She's mediocre at cleaning. 9, we're getting there. She does piano. She does voice lessons. She loves music. She knows notes that I've never heard of. She makes movies some days. They have all of this time to really explore themselves and nature and their interests. And it's such a blessing for any kid.
Yeah, Terrible Schools says it's no different than any other folks who struggle to self advocate. Vultures exist, and they swoop in and they feast on the corpse of innocence. So, like I said, I think that's certainly true. There's definitely some people who, questionable how they got where they are, but I do think it's a lot of it is just the system and the setup, and teachers not being given a lot of choices. They come in bright-eyed and cheery and ready to change the world, and then they see how the system is, and they end up clocking in and clocking out and just trying to get through the day and do the best that they can. I want to talk to you about some, I think that there's this idea out there that you need to have specialized resources for students who have disabilities. And it sounds like from what you're saying is that, okay, you have certain services which you supplement through your insurance, and they give you some direct instruction on to do things, but are there any specialized curriculums that you feel like you need, or how do you handle that? Because I know that's what parents were asking in the comments on my Instagram. They were saying, well, what resources can I use? Like, what curriculums can I use for my students with disabilities?
Yeah, so for us, my daughter doesn't have an intellectual disability. So, I might not know of certain ones, but she's a visual learner. So as soon as you learn how your kids learn, I say implement that with all kids. No, we're not just neurotypical or neurodiverse kids. Like every kid should have specific to how they learn, and it might change as you go. So be flexible. But my child learns best with visuals, and she learns best when she reads things herself. So auditory doesn't work for us. So I would say for us, we don't do. Okay, sorry, we're wearing
No.
today. We're wearing a one piece, so it's a little
nice, looking good.
So we use the good and the beautiful for language arts. Like I said, my daughter is pretty advanced with language arts. I find that it captures her interest. It's beautiful visually. It's a Christian curriculum, so it's not for everyone. But I really like the books that go along with it. And she's obsessed with spelling tests, which is hilarious to me. But for math, where we struggle, I found that Math with Confidence has a lot of what I would before call busy work. But oftentimes kids who, are in special education, they just need more repetition. So I feel like Math with Confidence definitely has that repetition. And what I was doing before was utilizing the good and the beautiful and then printing off certain things that we would struggle on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I switched over to Math with Confidence, but also Math UC. I heard is really great for visual kids. I haven't used it personally. This tends to be working for her, so we're going to stick with it for now.
So you do Math with Confidence, and then what is the one that you use for language arts? You said it's a Christian.
The Good and the Beautiful.
The Good and the Beautiful.
And the cool thing with the Good and the Beautiful is it's online for free. You can download it for free for math or language arts and just see if it works for your kid. And if it doesn't work for your kid, you didn't waste any money. Just print off a couple lessons and be like, oh, this isn't the right group, or oh, this is perfect, or no, I don't like the way this is set up. So for us, that was a really big hit for language arts. We're going to Knotgrass for history. I really like the way that's set up. I've used Tuttle Twins too. I really like the Tuttle Twins books. They have a lot of social and economic stuff, and they've got questions in the back. And you can get sheets from everything from coloring pages to, little writing pages from the Tuttle Twins. And I just really enjoy their content. So.
Yeah, and they, like you said, whether it's some great free resources online or things that you might have to invest a little bit of money in, any parent can look at it, look at the instructions, follow it, and because you know your child, you can implement it with success. And I think a lot of times for students with disabilities, what it is being able to front load some of that information and give them maybe more extended direct instruction. Whether it's on work or whether it's on those social pieces. And when you're in a public school and you're getting special education services, of course, they have those things written into their IEP, so-and-so gets direct instruction, or so-and-so needs vocabulary preloaded. But when you're in usually a very large class, or even if you're in a smaller class size setting, although I usually find the problem with those smaller class size settings is those students have lower IQs, which, nothing against those students. I know it happens, but that's another problem I find in the public schools is they just have, it's like, well, you can be in a big classroom and they have 2 teachers, or maybe they'll give you a para, but it's like, what kid wants another adult following them around all day? Or they put you in this small classroom, but those students have usually lower IQs and much more severe disabilities, which just doesn't work for a lot of kids who have disabilities, but they have higher IQs and they have a lot of potential. So it's just hard to find the right setting for them. But if you find yourself a good curriculum, you just named a few really good ones. Something I like to use is Khan Academy.
Oh, they're
I
great.
Yeah, my son doesn't really like to do it on the computer, but what I'll do is I'll just go and look at whatever math lesson we're up to, and I'll either print it out or I'll just write it down on a piece of paper for him. Or again, they have some stories on there you can print off with questions, and I like it because it's grade. You can see, okay, like what's the grade that they would be in public school, and where are they, and then if you need to jump ahead and go faster, you can do that as well. But especially if you're somebody who doesn't really know, like, well, where should is my kid supposed to be?
Mhm.
um, it really helps you with being able to make sure you're at the right place and doing things that are age appropriate for your child. So there's so many great resources out there, and as you said, anybody can pick these up, check them out,
Yeah.
and figure out what works for you and your child.
Yeah. I mean, I love that there's just so many options, and sometimes there's not a ton of conventions around here, but we do have one in Massachusetts for Mass Hope, and what they do is they have a ton of curriculum out where you can just go look at it. And I say get involved in like a local homeschool Facebook group and just ask your friends, say, hey, can everyone bring their math curriculum today? I want to take a look at it. And you can get an idea of what it looks like, so you don't go ahead and spend a ton of money. But the math with confidence that I was talking about is, I think it was $50 for the year. I mean, and it has the teacher's book. It's open and shut. A lot of these are open and shut. And while that might not work for your special education kid, it makes it easier because then you go, oh, I know what I need to add in here. Maybe we need
Right.
a story, or maybe we need a hands-on thing, or maybe we need an extra this.
And think what you talked about with the community is so important, right? Because you're not alone out there. If you don't know something, there's so many groups, whether they're on Facebook. I know there's a lot of parents who do it on Telegram, or they have homeschool meetups and homeschool co-ops that you can go to. Have a group of people who you can socialize with, and also just get some feedback, see what other people are doing out there. Because I know that's like the biggest thing I always hear. Well, I couldn't homeschool because my kid is so social. And I'm like, no, like my kid is hanging out with other kids all the time. And so something that I am thinking about a little bit more as my son gets older, I know like in the schools, they have clubs, they have organized sports teams and stuff. And so as your daughter gets older and some of the work gets more complicated, I guess, what are your plans? Because you said she's in third grade, right? So
Yeah.
she's got like 2 more years technically of elementary school. Is this something you're planning to do for the long haul? Like, how do you envision as she gets older, like the homeschooling thing will work?
So I won't say forever, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. She might want to go to a trade school for high school. She might want to, maybe I'm not meeting her needs as far as math goes, and she wants to go to a specialty small math school. I don't know. But for the long haul, for now, we're planning to homeschool. And my partner, a friend of mine, and I started a nonprofit, which is our co-op program, and we do electives and we do clubs. So we have things like dance club, garden club. There's art classes. There's all of these kind of things where the kids can get together based on their interests. We have kindness club, because I believe firmly that my child shouldn't be limited just because I don't want her in a public school.
Awesome. I love that. And so, how did you find? So, like you were talking about Facebook groups, and is that how you found these people, or how did you start to really just like take that leap and find those people? Because I know that's another big thing that people talk about. It's like, well, I don't really know anybody who homeschools, or also like just they say that they don't the expense of it. And I mean, I know for me, once you find 4 or 5 people, and if you put in $25 each, all of a sudden you have $125, something like that, $150. And you can hire a teacher. So what did that look like for you, finding these people, making this co-op? Like, where can people find or the co-op?
So we're full, but we do Moms Night Out so moms can get together. So you can look at all the possibilities on our Facebook page. It's just all the possibilities. It's we do some public events, but our program, we added more kids. We had to move to a bigger building because there's so many things growing from it. I found a local Facebook group where I connected with other moms. And I said, I don't just want a once a week, like science and history class. I want my kid to have assemblies. I want her to have electives. I want her to have fun. Our kids just put on Seussical Kids. They just put on a full musical. So it gives, we don't charge a lot of money. We have every parent take turns teaching. So we charge $200 for the whole year. And these kids are doing things like drama, and we fundraise a lot because that doesn't cover anything. But you know, the kids are able to do things. We're looking to add a robotics program. Our junior high kids are going to be doing engineering.
Nice.
You know, we're doing some home ec stuff too. You just have to just find your community, and sometimes it might mean traveling a little bit. Luckily, our community has a lot of homeschoolers, and it's been growing. Unfortunately, well, I think it's fortunate, but like unfortunately because of issues within our district, right? And so a lot of parents who even through 2020, 2022, 2023, 2024, they're calling me going, can't keep doing this. So
what would you say to that parent out there that is unhappy with their IEP? They're fighting constantly with the district. Both parents work full time. What would you say to them?
I mean, I think that it's a really tough decision, but I talked to a mom whose fifth grader can't read and write. And I said, do you think you can do worse? Try it. What's the worst thing that can happen? They're not reading. They're not writing. They're not doing math. Try it. Try it. I know it's disruptive. I know it's a lot of work. I know parents who worked opposite shifts. I mean, we're lucky. You know, we've decided to do the one income thing. It's not easy, but it's what works for our family right now. You know, and I know it's a lot, but give your kids that opportunity to learn. Try.
Yeah, I know for us, we've cut out the eating out.
Yeah.
Right. We've cut out some of the vacations.
Yeah.
And things like that. And my top priority is homeschooling my son. Yeah. And so I think I bought a nice outfit because I was going to a conference, and I was like, well, you know, like I think that's like maybe the last clothing that I bought. And so it's like you have to make lifestyle choices. I still am able to work because I do have a drop-off co-op that my son goes to 3 days a week. And then on days when he's home with me, we set up our schedule so that, you know, he has his activities where we're like, okay, you know, from this time to this time, you're playing by yourself. And then, like, for example, after this call, then we're going to go out and we're going to do a little basketball session together and a lesson. And then my neighbor's taking him and her son to jujitsu. So then I'll be able to get another couple hours of work in. And that's how we schedule it. So I still think it is possible to work at least part-time.
Yeah.
And have your child in a homeschooling situation. But like you've done, it's not like you're living a life of luxury. You made the choice that this is your luxury. Homeschooling is your luxury.
Yeah, you have to prioritize what you want. And I just don't discount yourself as a teacher. I would say I don't have a teaching background. I know a ton of homeschoolers who are teachers. They have the same struggles that I do. It's, you know, a lot of it is classroom management. It is different when it's one-on-one and it's your own kid and they know how to push your buttons. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I will 110% say it's worth it. And, you know, getting her not just the education, but the opportunities that she deserves is so beneficial for not just her, but our whole family. We love seeing her thrive. And, you know, I really just wish every kid could have that.
Do you have like a cool technique that you use when you guys are struggling? I know, like for me, something that I do that he definitely would never be able to do in school is we have a pull-up bar. And so when we're kind of like going through a little bit of a difficult, struggle and getting a math problem done or reading a tricky word, I'm like, all right, let's take a quick break, go do 5 pull-ups, max out on your pull-ups and then come back and we'll get this done. That just little sort of break up in the work, and it's something where he can spend a little bit of energy, and he likes it. He's like super into the pull-up thing. Do you have like a little trick or little techniques you've developed like that with your daughter?
Yeah, well, today actually we did the trampoline because it's nice out, but she has an indoor swing. So she'll like blast some music and swing on her swing and like scream sing it. And then she's good. She's back. Let's go back to it. All right, let's go, and just having them have that opportunity to take that break and come back to it. That's what we do as adults. So why shouldn't kids be able to do it? If you were struggling at work, you would walk outside for a minute and breathe, or you would go to the bathroom and just take a moment and then come back, and why can't kids do that too?
So we have a comment in here from Ariam. They say, do you have attendance and an IEP with homeschooling? Does the district provide any support? We did briefly cover this at the beginning of our discussion. I guess what I would say is that it's going to depend on what state you're in. As Mandee was saying, do you want to talk about the situation in Massachusetts and how you can have services there?
Yeah, so in Massachusetts, you can absolutely access services, whether it's reading support. You can do that through your district. You can do math support through your district, depending on your IEP. You can do OT, PT, speech, feeding therapy, whatever your child needs, you can access through the district. I do not have an IEP for my daughter with the district because I did not want them involved. And some people, if you're getting a certain specialty care, like feeding therapy, maybe that's not something that's as easy to access as, I don't know, like speech therapists are kind of everywhere, or OT. So that's up to you, but I don't. I thought it was better with a clean break. And if you do want to end your IEP, you do have to send a letter saying, I want to close the IEP. Our district left our IEP open and gained funds for my daughter, who they provided 0 services for 3 years, even though we sent that. So double check.
Yeah, it's a good thing. And that's why I would say the clean break is, I mean, again, if there's certain services that you need, or maybe your insurance doesn't allow you, like you do access services and you supplement them through your insurance, and you're able to get the provider you want, you're able to set the goals you want, as we had talked about. But the problem is that if you do stay with the school and continue to have their IEP with you, you're limited in so many ways. And it's like you still having to jump through so many of those hoops as if your child was still in the district. And what they look at your child as is dollar signs. They look at it a way to get extra funding to their school while still trying to stay in compliance, but not actually necessarily help your child. So she's saying here that, or he, that the wait list here for services is insane. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to vary from district to district, what is available, what they can do. Yeah, go ahead.
If it means the difference between you being able to homeschool and not being able to homeschool, take the services and homeschool. But if you can do that clean break, do it. I would also say, as far as services go, squeaky wheel gets the grease. I've been on many wait lists, and I just call them twice a week, and they get used to me, and they get really annoyed, and all of a sudden they get me in. So I'm just passionate about my kid, and so don't be afraid to be that.
And so Turnbull says that he commends you for casting off the IEP altogether, because a bunch of strangers, they pretend to be experts and know your kid, but usually it's a sham. Ariam says that she's from Washington State. She's homeschooling. It's her first year, and she said, "Thank you for this call. It's a blessing." Yeah, and I know you had asked about like attendance and keeping records. I know at a place like New York State, right? If this is going to vary from state to state, New York State has a lot of requirements for reporting back to the state and doing attendance. I would still say it's the preferable thing to do than be in the New York State schools. They have one of the highest rates of special education and some of the worst outcomes. But I know here in Connecticut, our only homeschooling law is you must provide your child with an education in reading, writing, math, and there's no reporting, none of that. If your kid was enrolled in a district, like my son did go for 1 year, and then I just had to write them a letter and say, my son will no longer be attending. I'm going to be educating them according to whatever the statute was. So I know here we don't have any attendance reporting, no tests that they need to take or anything like that. So certainly make sure you know what the landscape is in your state, what the laws are in terms of being able to pull your kid out, if you have to do any reporting. I know one thing that people always ask about is report cards or getting into college. And what I've learned is that you can write your own child's transcripts. So that's pretty cool too.
I will just say that if you have a special education kid and you are pulling them, you might get some pushback. I got a call from my daughter's principal when I sent my letter of intent, and she said, "We just don't want her to fall further behind." And I said, "Me either," and that's why I'm pulling her. And I think I just talked to a grandmother recently who they talked them out of homeschooling because they have a kid in special education last year. And she's like, "We want to do it." I go, "Just send the email." She goes, "Well, what if they want to meet with me?" Tell them it's not necessary. So just know the rules, follow them, and be confident. I make a very detailed report for our family, and then I send what's necessary to the district. Through my state. That's what's necessary. I send that, but I have a very detailed account of what we've been learning for her. Someday she might want to look at it. Who knows? If anyone has questions, I have everything, but I'm only going to send you the bare minimum.
Okay, so there is some reporting requirements in Massachusetts?
Yes,
okay.
Yearly, yeah.
Awesome. I should probably do a little bit, at least just for the transcripts and, having my own little accounting record of what we're doing. I have everything. We use like one notebook where we've been doing stuff for our own lessons. So maybe I can just keep that. And then I also know at school, they give us, at his co-op, we get, they did a whole unit on script writing. So I have that. So I should get my little folder together and label it. That's a good idea. Try to stay organized. Have you heard of HSLDA? Do you know anything about them?
Yeah, so HSLDA is a Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They are great. So if you are getting any legal pushback, I think it's $100, maybe $150 to be a member of theirs for the year. Don't quote me on that. It's around there. And then they have a legal team that will work with you if you do have any issues legally with your district. So they're a great organization. And like I said, I have not needed to use them. I'm not a member, but I know other people who have and have had great success.
Yeah. So, of course, the teachers and the school districts, they're going to have their opinions. They're going to try to push back when you pull your kid out. They're going to try to make you even more scared, right? And it's scary. It's scary for anybody to take that leap and to do it on your own. And especially if you have to be like, well, I still have to work and I want to give my kid the attention. And that the district is going to push back on you oftentimes. I think for me, when I sent mine in, they were like, oh, good, get this lady out of here. Because I had been giving them a lot of trouble about all the COVID era restrictions and everything too. So I think they were kind of happy to see me go. But I definitely know, especially if you have a kid in special education, again, they see dollar signs on your kid's head because they get extra funding. And so be like Mandee. Be like Mandee, say, nope, I got this. I'm good. I care about my kid too. That's exactly why I'm pulling them. Anything else before we get out of here, Mandee? Any last words of advice? Any thoughts you got?
I just say, like, if your kid is having a hard time, try it. Try it. In our state, you can re-enroll them at any time. If you in Massachusetts, if you go 3 months in and you go, whoa, this was bad, I honestly don't think you'll do that. I all of the
I
people
would say give it more than 3 months. You got to
no,
give it more than 3 months.
I'd give it a full year. But just like, if your whole world turns upside down and you're sick or you can re-enroll them. Why not give it a try and see if you're making progress? And I will say that first year, when you're figuring out really how your kids learn, it's tricky. But once you get past that, you get into a rotation, and it's just a beautiful thing.
It is. It is a very beautiful thing. But yeah, definitely it takes some getting used to, both working with your child. And I would say probably, the longer they've been in school, there's more that you're going to have to overcome.
For sure.
And if they're a little bit older, but again, you give it some time, work through it, be like Mandee. And where can people find you? Where can they follow you? What do you got for us?
Oh, I'm on Instagram. It's silly. It's Mandee with 2 E's, Mandee Dandy with 2 E's, do with 2 O's. And then all the possibilities. If you're in Massachusetts, you ever want to do a mom's night out, we post them monthly, and we do have some other fun public stuff. Unfortunately, we're full. I would love for people to recreate our program all over the world. I think we need more opportunities for homeschoolers. So.
And that's called All the Possibilities?
Yep, that's it. Because
all the possibilities. Love
doing it all.
Love it. So, like she said, they're full in Massachusetts, but I would love to talk more about that maybe next time and give people the blueprint for how they could possibly recreate that in their state or in their part of the state. Yeah. So, and then one last comment here before we get out of here. Turnbull says, from what I hear, the majority of homeschool parents are happy with the results. They scream freedom louder than a medieval Mel Gibson. And yes, freedom is what it's all about. As you said, especially for a student with special education needs, it is the ultimate individualized education plan. It is a beautiful thing for your child. It's a beautiful thing for for you as a parent. And it is such a blessing to be able to spend so much time with my son, and I don't think I'll ever regret it. So thank you so much, Mandee, for sharing your story, for giving all the advice. And I would like to have another conversation. Maybe we can talk more about the all the possibilities and giving people a blueprint for that. But let me let you get back to your daughter and have a beautiful rest of your day. All right.
Thank you. You too. Thanks so much.
And thank you to everybody out there who checked in. Remember, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.